Kia ora everyone, I'm sitting here in Hagley Park in Christchurch. I'm down here for Mass Conference, and I've gone out for a bit of a walk because a few weeks ago I read an article on desire paths, and I thought it was really interesting, and I thought it had some implications for education and how it works within schools and how the changing environments impact our students and the way they learn and the way we teach. And so a desire path is erosion as a consequence of human foot traffic. So for example, it's a path that's been worn in to a grassy patch where people have crossed multiple times. And the reason I have gone out for a walk is I've been looking for some of these desire paths around Christchurch, and I found a few of them. And the term desire path, it's getting quite a bit of traction in business as businesses look at the way that end users are using their product. Now for us as educators, that's the way our students are taking what we teach and finding different ways to use the information that we provide them or the learning experiences that we give them. So I've managed to find a few of these desire paths within Hagley Park, and I'm just going to talk briefly on some of them and maybe look at some of the relationships or the implications or links to the way we approach education as teachers. So the first desire path I found was really interesting. And as you can see, it is just some erosion that occurs next to one of the major footpaths around Hagley Park, and it is only just off the path. And if you're a bit of a runner, which I'm not, so I'm not really speaking from experience here, but if you do hours and hours of running each week, that pounding on the concrete is not great for your knees and for your feet. So this desire path here is being formed by runners so that they are easing some of the stress and the load on their joints as they do their running. So instead of carrying on along this path, they have chosen to just come off the path slightly and run alongside. So the path was created for people to walk on and run on, but the design of that path is not ideal for everybody. So runners who want to use the path have decided, no, this isn't for me. I'm doing all these hours, I'm getting sore knees, so I'm just going to scoot on over here and I'm going to run along this path. So that's a really good example of a desire path. The second desire path that I found was quite simply a shortcut. So Hagley Park's quite big, and there's pathways around the outside. And so what this was simply people had decided that they wanted to take a shortcut straight through the middle, and that path over time had been eroded, and it was actually quite a nice walkway, as you can see on the video, and it goes through some trees, and basically it's just a simple shortcut from point A to point B that hadn't been identified by the people that designed the park. And it's actually quite a common thing that some of the universities are doing overseas, is that they're deliberately not designing pathways around a university, because what they can do is wait to see where these desire paths are created, and then they can plan the pathways, the footpaths and everything like that afterwards, and that says a lot about how we go about co-constructing some of our learning program with our students. So the third desire path I found was I had to have a bit of a think about how or why that had been created, and my thoughts around it are that the bridge creates a bit of a junction point, and you combine that with the foot traffic of the walkers and the runners on the footpath, and then you throw in the large tree that's just off the track. I think what's happening here and why this desire path has been created is that to minimize some of the volume or the loading at that junction point, runners have decided to just give way to walkers by running around that tree, and that's where that desire path has been created. So end users or runners are seeing a potential issue with the use of the footpath, so they are negating that potential for running or bumping into somebody by creating that desire path around the outside of that tree, which I think is pretty cool. The fourth desire path was a really interesting one, and it had a bit of a negative approach to it, and you can see that this desire path has been created for a reason. I think there's a bit of a bottleneck here, and cyclists, it looks like, have decided that they would just avoid some of the pedestrians and the runners by riding onto the verge, and you can see that a council member has decided that this shouldn't be happening, and they've gone and provided some barriers to prevent cyclists from carrying on and doing this. And so this desire path lends well into talking about the implications that desire paths have for education, and I really think that's a good example, is that as teachers, when we design a learning experience for our students, we have this idea in our head that we are going to maybe walk our students through our learning so they can go from A to Z, and so we design our learning task or our learning experiences for our students in that manner, and we possibly don't provide enough flexibility in that. And that fourth desire path was a really prime example that, hey, instead of providing a barrier to stop people from using the path or the verge in an unintended manner, maybe the council should have looked at that and gone, hey, well, this obviously isn't serving its purpose, that maybe we need to go and extend the footpath here because there is a bit of a bottleneck as people come off the bridge. So it's a little bit about us as educators reflecting on our processes and the experiences that our students have, and maybe looking at how we can adjust things or change things or do things a little bit outside of the square, so that our students can have maybe a more authentic learning experience. And some other examples that I've thought of, for example, in physical education, we assess a practical standard, and most schools for that practical standard will spend 8 to 10 weeks teaching a sport, and then we assess our students in that sport. But there's a few schools that they just assess their students in their chosen sport, and of course if it's your chosen sport that you've been participating in or playing for 8 to 10 years, you're going to be really good at it, and you're going to get better results as a consequence of that. So that's an example of a desire path in education where people are seeing that, hey, there's maybe this way that we can achieve better grades, so they're implementing that with their classes. Another example of a desire path that I've noticed, or actually Matt Lambert from the PE Gear Shed and the HOD from Heretatonga College mentioned to me, was with my study series. So we provide transcripts of the videos for the students, and a desire path that has been identified is that students, instead of just watching the video, some of them are choosing to just download the transcripts, read the transcripts, and use them to answer the quizzes. And when I first heard that, I thought, oh, we got to try to plug that, because that's not the intended use of the transcripts. And then I thought about it, and actually there's some good learning going on there, and it suits maybe a student who is not so good or conscientious watching a video, and they're not taking in or digesting the content well, but hey, they can read and they digest their content or their learning better that way. So instead of in education maybe looking at all of these students who are thinking outside of the box or outside of the square and trying to do things differently, maybe we should be embracing some of these concepts and some of these ways that our end user or our student are choosing to use our lessons and our learning and our teaching, and maybe learn something from them. So that's my take on desire paths and what I've seen lying around Christchurch. But I'd love to hear if anybody else has had any similar experiences or has an idea of how they've seen a desire path in education, because I'd like to do a little bit more thinking about it and maybe putting some of these ideas into action. So you'll also notice that I'm chucking up the NZB Teachercast, the podcast, up on its Facebook page now, as well as on my blog and on Podomatic, and I'm also going to start uploading these video logs over the next wee bit onto the Facebook page as well. So please, if you haven't already, jump on and like the Facebook page, and review the podcast too if you haven't already. But thanks for listening in, and enjoy this beautiful weather that we're having at the moment.